I can do things at WED without asking anybody, even my wife.
Coney Island, world's biggest barrel of
and
fun.
anywhere else your imagination takes you.
Okay, we've done that. Now what?
To get the whole show now, you hurry.
Anything's possible at Disneyland.
Welcome aboard the Themed Attraction Podcast, where we take you for a ride through the wonderful world of theme park design, that is. You've just set sail for another unparalleled adventure of discovery and discussion with theme park industry masters of the craft. I'm your skipper, Freddy Martin, and floating the river with me as always is theme park designer, master planner, and chief creative officer for Storyland Studios, Mel McGowan. Which way's the river taking us today, Mel?
Well, Freddie, we've got another one of our worldwide cruises today as we sail north, south, east, and west with architect, master planner, and designer, and my neighbor, Jeff Damron. Jeff's expansive design journey as an independent architect, and then with the world's largest E&A architecture engineering firm, AECOM, has brought him from California, Hawaii, to Spain, Australia, Malaysia, and Japan. In all his master plans and designs probably span beyond the 10 million square feet limit of family fun, luxury escapes, and destination delights the world over, including some pretty fun projects for Tokyo Disney Sea, Lotte World in Seoul, and Park Warner in Madrid.
And not only does Jeff share a lot of artful and engaging destinations, we also share a birthday. Go figure.
I knew there was something I liked about you guys.
Alrighty, folks, keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the boat because this episode is about to leave the dock. Hit it, Sam. Hey, Mel, one of the first things I think I heard about you when I was at Children's Hunger Fund and we were considering hiring you to design Poverty Encounter, the attraction that became Poverty Encounter. What I heard was that you had a hand in developing the Disney's Grand Californian Hotel and how that was the very first in-berm lodging experience where you could be sleeping inside of a theme park and all of that. And I'm always fascinated by the process that it must have taken to integrate so much into such a little tiny space. We're talking about a hotel, the pools, the restaurants, the entertainment. There's a movie theater. There's a ESPN zone. There's all this stuff all mashed together, and then you add the chaos and gigantic draw of a theme park to that same mix. I'm just fascinated by what you and that team had to do to make that happen.
It's funny because, the normal architecture and development world starts at something called schematic design. And it goes through design development, construction documents, and so on and so forth. But really so much of the heavy lifting, the foundation, the pixie dust, the special sauce, or whatever you want to, for our industry, the experience design development industry, it really happens before that schematic phase ever, in terms of what I think of as pre-production, all the strategery, the feasibility, the visioning, the pre-concept, the preliminary concept, the final concept design, all the testing and adjusting, that blue sky phase. We have a unique process we call the story circles to really walk through the fundamentals of character, setting, and plot. But specifically, when it comes to designing something at the scale of an urban mixed use thing that's supposed to be the central gathering place for a region that has multiples of millions of locals as well as millions of visitors. You can't imagine. I mean, we're looking at, is this thing based on surface parking? Is it subterranean parking? Is it parking structure? I mean, because you can't even think of land in terms of filling land the same way that Disney traditionally had thought about land planning and how many units per acre, whether it's parking units or guests per acre or design days. You really have to think vertically. You have to think what's the residual land value, like what's the appropriate parking solution for this phase of work, for this next 5, 10, 15 years. what's an appropriate phase to think about a future state where surface asphalt lots are automatically assumed to be land banks. That's a lot of the work that's being done with Disneyland Forward right now in terms of finally getting to flesh out all those surface lots. And again, as you can imagine, just dealing with all the different stakeholders and operators, from theme park guys that would be freaked out at the idea of hotel guests hanging their underwear or bathing suits or towels on the hotel balconies that are part of the show, in the berm or in our version of Yosemite National Park, and trying to negotiate all those operational concerns and where the lines are in terms of the different fiefdoms and kingdoms with management and power structures. And ironically, as I was looking at some of that stuff for Disney's Grand Californian Hotel, Jeff was doing the same thing in Tokyo Disney Seas. At actually my favorite hotel in the world, the best hotel night ever experience was for my birthday one year at the Miracosta. So that's quite an accomplishment.
Well, speaking of Jeff, I mean, he's got a lot of experience doing this. And if you take a top-down look at any of these wonderful human magnets that we love, these theme parks and then the resorts that surround them and all of that, you really get a sense of the mastery that has to happen in order to make something like this really workable, really walkable, really human friendly, and at the same time as efficient and helpful towards the enjoyment as possible. Well, our guest today is Jeff Damron. Jeff is a 30-year veteran, 30-plus-year veteran. He wouldn't probably like me to say how many years, but he's been doing themed entertainment and destination design for so many years, providing his expertise as an architect, designer, and master planner in theme park projects, hotels, resorts, casinos, and many, many more mixed-use projects where people can live, work, and play. Most recently, he came on board as one of Mel's Storylanders as a senior VP of architecture, master planning, and design. That's quite a title. And now I want to introduce to you our Themed Attraction podcast interview with our friend, Jeff Damron. Well, Jeff Damron, it's great to have you here on the Themed Attraction podcast. It's actually been a long time coming, hasn't it, Mel?
Jeff and I have been friends, collaborators, and neighbors for several decades, but I am so stoked not just to have him on the podcast, but to welcome him on board as our new vice president of master planning and architecture at Storyland Studios. So welcome aboard, matey.
Thank you very much. It has been a long time. I'm almost ashamed to look back how long we've known each other. And
we're not going to mention age on this podcast.
No, we're not. Good.
No.
I'll probably give it away anyway shortly.
Yeah, it's okay. It's been a minute, to say the least.
Yes.
I remember times when we would be working on projects, Mel, and you would say, well, I need to ask my neighbor because you guys don't live too far from each other. Yep. You'd ask Jeff for thoughts and ideas. I love that.
Well, Jeff, man, you've got an incredible story in terms of some of your roots and the collaborators you've had. I don't even know where to start, where to begin. But I mean, in terms of your first brushes with the industry, which without listing decades or years, I guess, is there eras or names?
I'll start with, I was in high school when I got my first job as working with an architectural firm. And I mostly did it in part because my brother, Greg Damron, and my cousin, David Damron, who were both in the industry.
Legends, I should
legends. Add. And, they were great. I mean, they set the bar really high from an early age and much higher than I feel like I've ever achieved. But I've had, some fun working with them. But anyway, I ended up working with that firm for almost 20 years. And in the process, early on, we had a client. His name was Ray Watson. Ray was the president of Newport Development Company and also a member of the board of directors at Disney.
Ray was also one of my adjunct professors in Master
really?
Planning School, believe it or not.
Now, he was a great guy, was he not?
He was awesome. Very humble. Amazing.
Very, very humble guy.
I used to walk the Ray Watson Bridge between UC
that right?
Irvine and UC Irvine Town Center every day, twice a day.
So Ray, I was actually doing Ray's house as a draftsman for David Klages, who was the architect. And Ray came to us one day and said, "Listen, I need to start doing some planning for Disney, and you want to do some really big stuff." So he had us master planning for him and St. Joe Company, I think it was, or plain St. Joe. Yep. And it was the Disney Vacation Village. And we ended up doing several dozen different plan layouts for him, different sites. And he just took them all. So that was
by the way, historical note, Ray Watson, president of the Irvine Company, the largest master plan development probably in the first world at the time, 150,000 acres, something like that, went on to be president or chairman of the Walt Disney Company. Really was part of the team that brought Michael Eisner over. So kind of a big deal.
There's a book out that tells the story of when all that happened. It was called, I think it's called Raiding the Magic Kingdom or something like that. Yeah. And boy, I was right there with Ray when all this was going down. I was just a draftsman, but I was in the conference rooms a lot and listening in a little bit of what's going on. It was, to see the book come out after the fact was pretty interesting. Anyway,
one of the things I loved about Ray is that he loved the first community that he master planned and worked on, which was East Bluff in Irvine. I think it's also where Tom Morris actually grew up in the same neighborhood. Oh. And Ray actually stayed living in that same neighborhood and never strayed. A lot of these guys.
House. Yep.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's cool.
That's right. Yeah. So working with Greg, as you know, Greg was an illustrator and a designer, and Greg was working for Rich Battaglia in about middle of the 80s, late 80s, and he asked me to come over and work with him, and that was my first foray into entertainment design, and I ended up working with him on the Lotte World project in Jamsil, Seoul, Korea, and I got to saddle up next to Howard Brummett, who is a legendary Imagineer, has its own window in Disneyland, Florida, and he was a classic artist, Renaissance kind of guy. He came out of the construction industry during the Depression, and then gravitated towards architecture drafting and architecture design. He eventually became an Imagineer in the early '60s and stayed there for a long time. When I met him, he was probably 80. And wow. I knew him for the rest of his life. He lived a long time, and he was just an amazing man, amazing person, very godly person, very, just a great guy all around.
It's so important to have those mentors.
Oh yeah, I was so lucky. Right? I was so lucky. In addition to Greg and David's, especially Greg's mentorship, I got to go to Korea for quite a while with Howard, and just him and I, and we spent some time doing the castle and amongst other things, the rest of Lotte World. So that was really special. And then after we finished that, I went back to Klage's office and worked as an architect, and then wasn't doing much more than architecture per se, but we were doing a lot of golf. We were a design firm, so we did a lot of golf courses, golf course resorts, golf clubhouses. We did, Sentosa Island Master Plan, the Sentosa Island Country Club, Singapore Island Country Club. Just up and down the Asian seaboard, we were doing golf resorts and hotels up and down during the '90s, and it was fun because I was young and I got to travel a lot.
Do you play golf?
I do play golf.
So that's kind of fun to get to
play
in that sandbox, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the island that Universal Studios Singapore is on today.
That's right.
It's an entertainment acre. So,
As a golf designer, we got to work with some of the greatest companies in the world. We got to work with Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and Gary Player and Greg Norman, and the list just goes on. Payne Stewart. I mean, just great guys who we got to interact with and work with. But yes, I was getting that. We had done some. Our firm was hired by Greg, who was currently at this time. It was the VP of design at Master Plan and Design at Universal Studios in LA, and he hired us to do some studies with him and Bob Ward on City Walk. So we did a number of city walks all over the country, in Boston and Asia, and Denver. We did some City Walk work and just really studying what is City Walk, what was City Walk, what should it be. And so that was another foray into the entertainment industry. And then they hired us. Universal had us come in. We had a whole team of about 30 people who came in. This is funny because Craig Hanna was there, and this is right prior to him starting Thinkwell. And he was one of many, but we were designing the Universal Studios in Singapore. And it was a different site, and it had an arena next to it. And but we did some planning for them, and it didn't quite materialize into anything. And then it went away, and I came back and was doing architecture work and was actually doing a lot of work at Disneyland, a lot of the kind of, as an architect, the construction documentation for renovation of their CapEx rides and attractions, restaurants and retail, all through Disneyland. So I kind of stayed in touch with them. And then they eventually hired me. They asked me to come on board and be one of the staff architects there at Imagineers to do the Hotel Miracosta in Tokyo, which was, a fantastic design project. I think the company spent, not me, but the company spent probably 7 years designing that park and hotel and maybe 3 years building it.
I mentioned to you, I had a chance to spend a birthday night there, one of the best overnights in a theme park in my life. I think you were working on that while I was working on the Grand Californian.
Isn't that funny?
I bowed down to the team on the Miracosta. Certainly had the better budget, but at the end of the day, probably one of the most immersive, beautiful, multi-sensory aesthetic experiences.
It was really great because when I got there, they actually showed me the book, the narrative book that everybody was responsible to read prior to putting first pen to paper. And it was a book, a full book. And I read the whole thing, and it was just so great. And, we had people at Imagineers up there from Italy. We had these 4 women, I remember, who were painting full-size not replicas, but full-size facades of all the Trompe l'oeil that they were going to paint on the facade of the hotel. So they would paint these for a couple of weeks, and they'd paint them white, and they'd do them again. They'd paint them white, they'd do them again, and just over and over and over. These 4 Italian women who were just fantastic. They none of them spoke a word of English, and they would sit out in the back lot outside and do their paintings, and we'd see them at lunch and try to talk to them. But it was quite interesting.
That's amazing. It really is a beautiful resort, isn't it? It just loaded with story and loaded with just and the artistry that got all pulled into that. It just sounds amazing. Must get there soon.
And I got to work with all of the main architects at Disneyland Imagineers. All wanted a part of this project. So at some point, they were all in and out of the project. Wingwood's, of course, was there, and Todd Linehan was there, and Val was there. Just the whole list of architects who worked on it was amazing.
At what point did you come into it at that particular project?
I came into it. There were some shenanigans that went on that dismissed a previous team. And they were in need of shoring that team up, so they asked me to come in and finish it. So I worked for about the last 14 months while I was here in the States, and then it moved off into Asia, in which case they gave me an offer to go with them. Or Mel, you mentioned the Waldorf Astoria in Dana Point. I got a much bigger, better offer to design that hotel. So I moved over to
my wedding night hotel. So you designed my birthday hotel and my wedding night hotel.
So
thanks, man.
It is a great hotel, and it's got a beautiful view of the coast. And the owners gave me a room as well now on my honeymoon. So it was wedding night actually. So that was really sweet, really special. Yeah. And it's still nice. I still go down there regularly and play golf at the resort. So.
Well, it's nice. You and I live on one end of Crown Valley Parkway, and the hotel sits right on the opposite end of Crown Valley.
That's right.
We could almost ride a skateboard down the hill. It'd be a long ride, but
almost. But you're right; it's almost downhill the whole way. Anyway, after that, after that hotel was built, we at my office, which was AECOM, we had been doing a lot of the work at Disneyland and doing a lot of the attractions, and probably on a regular basis. We had a good staff, maybe a dozen architects, and then as many engineers who helped us in house. That we did a lot of the attraction upgrades and remodels and new stuff, and then we bid on and won about 1/3 of the California Adventure Park. So we documented as architects about the Paradise Pier area of California Adventure. So that was a lot of fun. And then just as that project was ending for us, we won the project to become the lead design architect for the Warner Brothers project in Madrid. So I was just fortunate that every time I had a project come to an end, another one started up, and I didn't really seek it out or anything. It just kind of evolved, and in the whole time I'm looking for people to mentor with and learn from, and undoubtedly I go back to Greg, my brother, constantly, because if anybody knows him, I'm sure a lot of people do. He is very good at what he does, very, very good. And anyway, I got a chance to be the architect and do some of the design. We hired my cousin David to work with me for a while, which was fun. And then,
by the way, I've always thought that Madrid park, especially for U.S. Based fans and designers, is one of the most under-recognized.
I would agree with
some
you,
of the design. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. At least universal level and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Gotham area there. I mean, just.
I was going to say, David and I worked on the Gotham area quite a bit, and it came out really well.
Yeah, love the L Train street show.
Yep.
Just really brings that to life in a way that Galaxy's
I think I still have those original thumbnails around here somewhere. Anyway, going beyond that, staying in entertainment design, I acted as architect of record on many projects in between that, a lot of hotels, a lot of things. But I went on to do a golf community, and as the recession of 2007 started, our golf stuff slowed where I was. So I was actually working for a developer, whereas president of development. So that project slowed, and then I immediately got a call to work on the Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi project from Atkins. So I went to work for them, worked for about a year on that project, and it was canceled due to the economic downturn. So, like everybody else, I was looking for work at the time, and fortunate enough that a REIT who happened to foreclose on a bunch of hotels called me and asked me to just go to work for them. So for the next 3 or 4 years, I did nothing but hotel design with them, just upgrading all their hotels. So I felt like I was still in entertainment because hospitality is such a big part of entertainment.
Well, especially when that's in Hawaii. These aren't like Des Moines, Iowa
that's
convention
right.
Hotels, right?
It was a rough recession having to fly to Hawaii every other week.
That was rough.
But it was good experience, and I enjoyed it. And then about the time that was ending, I got a call from AECOM again asking to come back, and they were bidding on the Warner Brothers project in Abu Dhabi, and the client actually called me at home and asked to meet my brother and I, Greg and I, out in IAPA one year just prior to this, and just kind of talked about the project. They were getting ready to start it back up, and he wanted to see, if we could help. So just oddly enough, when they went to bid, they bid for the lead design consultant was Atkins and AECOM. So Atkins was the firm I started the project with. AECOM was the firm I was going to bid. And Atkins put my brother on their team. So the client called me before they selected and said, look, we're going to get one of you guys on this project. So AECOM won that, and we ended up, I ended up going to work for them. And
Greg's probably still pissed at you, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Just kidding.
I don't think that bothered him.
He's always been plenty busy.
He's usually got so much work. The guy just I don't know. I've never seen anybody work like him, but it's another story. Anyway, so I come back in. When I had left AECOM, their division in entertainment design pretty much died. When I came back on board, we grew the thing right up, and And we're working on as the lead design consultant for Warner Brothers, and I had a big role in that as the architect and planner, and not just the park. I worked very closely with Thinkwell and Larry Wyatt's team on the planning of attractions and locations, and that was, again, great experience. But I also brought a lot of knowledge to the table to implement that, and work closely with the client, on a regular basis on planning what they needed from the deliverable side for that project. Because how many indoor theme parks do you get to work on in your life? I think there's only two, and I've been on both of them, both the World and Abu Dhabi. So so unique knowledge was gained in both times. And then as I'm segueing off of the Abu Dhabi project I had transitioned the project to Dubai, and I'm living in Dubai, and the AECOM team is taking that over. I get a call asking me if I can attend an interview with Universal Studios and Mark Woodbury on the master plan for Beijing. So I set my alarm at 3 a.m. and I get up and slap my face and interviewed, and that was the first pass. And they decided to hire us, and we also brought my brother Greg in, and he and I spent the next, I want to say the next month maybe in Orlando in our office, our AECOM office that's close to downtown, unbeknownst to anybody else inside of Universal, and we sat there and master planned the resort in Beijing.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then that eventually grew to a documented master plan that AECOM produced, and Greg had a big part of it. I had a big part of it. And then we designed City Walk out of the gate. We didn't decide the parks, because the park was pretty much Universal branded IP lands that they were sprinkling around. But the overall master plan, the hotel planning, all that we did. And then we got an opportunity as AECOM to bid on to become the lead design consultant for all of it. So we bid on all of it, and we won the first two hotels, and we won 3 of the 5 lands in the park. So we then took those and documented those, and I took the hotels, and I personally did the hotels and planned them all the way through construction. COVID got in the way there at the end, so we actually didn't have to go there, which was good and bad. But yeah, it was quite an experience. So after that, that was just a few years ago, and without even thinking about it, I find myself still in with both feet in a big way now with Storyland. So bringing that whole history right into the Storyland offices and planning, master plan, architecture, and looking forward to continuing this very unexpected career in architecture.
Okay, so when you say unexpected, what was it about it that drew you first? You say you were unexpected. Let's go back to young Jeff Damron and that head and heart in. When did you first pick up a pencil?
I was in high school, and I was a freshman in high school. This was between 8th and 9th grade, and I wanted to do a project that was at the Orange County Fair, and I did a project and I submitted it, and then my teacher came back and said, no, it's only for seniors. And I said, yeah, but I already did all the work. And he made an argument for me, got me in, put my name in there, and I won the blue medal. So I'm like, hey, this is cool. So I'll just keep doing this. So I just kept in drafting classes. I actually went to I would go to Fluor, which, Fluor Corporation now here in Orange County. And on the weekends, on Saturday mornings and Wednesday nights, I'd go there and I would trace their plumbing plans to learn how to draft.
Wow.
And they paid me for it. So I did these little nuts and bolts and stuff. And then I just kept doing architectural drafting. And then one day I just decided it was summertime. And I walked into David Clage's office between my sophomore and junior year and said, hey, can I have a job? And I must say that it might have helped that Greg called him and said I was coming by, because he did. So Craig also got me that job.
Always great to
we
have
should
your
mention
brother.
Dave Clay, just kind of again another, to me, under-recognized architect. I mean, one of William Pereira, the guy that master planned Irvine, one of his proteges, and Petronas Towers, Kuala Lumpur, Burj Dubai.
We worked on them all.
Pretty influential guy.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to stay with them, and they were very good to me. They actually gave me a scholarship to that architecture school, and I never finished. I had so much work experience that between semesters I came home one summer and took my exam and passed. And I said, well, I'm not going to go back to school now. I've got my license. So I just kept working. So.
How do you tell a story when people listen with more than their ears? Stories change lives. They make us remember, but only when they are felt and not just heard. Storyland Studios builds the impossible. We turn big ideas into reality. We tell stories in 3 dimensions to stir the senses so you can walk into places you've only seen in your dreams, in real life and real time. Storyland's artists, architects, and artisans take stories out of the imagination and build tangible dreams that leave lasting impressions and memories that endure for years. What's your story? Storyland Studios is themed entertainment, destination design, production, and fabrication. Connect with the team at Storyland Studios to get started building your impossible dream today. Visit StorylandStudios.com or call now, 800-218-1932. That's 800-218-1932. Storyland Studios, your big ideas' best ally.
Well, Jeff, one of the things I'd love to get your take on is, a lot of times, when we would introduce, whether it's Imagineering or Storyland Studios, we'd highlight the fact that, hey, unlike how most people think that projects of this scale happen, it's not typically like a Starchitect or one architect, one man's vision, right? It's this wonderful motley crew, this wonderful collective art form.
Without a doubt.
And
when you start a project, it's usually a couple guys talking, and then it grows into a couple guys' napkin sketches, and then it grows into a few more guys, and then a few more guys, and then you've got some story guys coming in, and then you've got ride and attraction people, creatives who are saying, what ifs, what if we do this? What if we do that? Can we do this? And then when you start the realization of that, which is where my real strong point starts, is implementing some of these crazy ideas and documenting them for construction and then seeing to it that they get built in the way that the creatives wanted. It's as close as we can with budget in mind and, as much thematic ability we can put into them. Working with Disney was a huge asset because I got to see the good. Only the bar was set real high with Disney. So when I would go off to Warner Brothers or go off to another, I still tried to achieve that bar. I mean, to talk about the number of people, Mel, at one time on those 2 hotels we were doing at Universal, AECOM, just for those 2 hotels. I'm sorry, for the 2 hotels in the 3 lands. We had 350 people working on that project just in our office.
Wow.
Between six offices globally, we had 352 people working on that project. So when you talk about why it takes a village to build something, that's why the technology that comes into these attractions that maybe aren't so noticeable to the general public, but is something that is purposefully planned. For example, when you go into an e-ticket attraction that's really thrilling, you might go through an outdoor queue and then you come into the pre-show and you're indoors. A lot of people get a little bit nervous if they haven't been on these rides and attractions, and if it's warm in there, they get sick. So we always temper the air down a little bit to keep people as comfortable as they can. And these are subtleties that get realized as you start implementing rides and attractions for the guests. It's always about the guest experience. So, the noise level of where they're at. If the queue's too loud, you want to make sure you've got plenty of the acoustic, detailing in there to soften and cater and target the ear for the music or sounds you want to hear. all the way through the queue and into the ride and attraction. So, whether it's pyrotechnics or wind or acoustics or, your typical structural, mechanical, plumbing, all that stuff, you want to make sure that that's all designed in a way that if ever needs service is outside of the purview of the guest, right? So bad parks won't do that. Good parks like Disney and Warner Brothers take extra care. I got to, and I've got to work with some really great people. I'm so blessed in that way. I mean, the ThinkWell group, they were great. Mel, Storyland, you guys are, great. And I'm really fortunate to have landed again in another place I'm going to get to sponge off of so much creativity. So again, I'm looking forward to it. And
well, love your perspective, Jeff. Management would brag, that, hey, 140 different, not to mention the head count, but just 140 different disciplines, of which architecture was only one of them. That statement really underplays the role, though, that architecture quite often has, both in the history of the art form, where you had guys like Claude Coates and some of the original Imagineers that really were forced into animation because of the Great Depression and some other things. But, Ken Anderson, I mean, these original Imagineering, art directors really wouldn't have been able to do what they did without that architectural background. But even today, with the amount of the heavy lifting in terms of, like you mentioned, documentation of all the different disciplines, that really ultimately does come under the purview of that architect of record.
It's funny you say that, because the guys I originally met at the Imagineers, they were all architects. I don't care what discipline they were in. Originally, they happened to be architects. And back in the day, we didn't have project managers to manage everything. The architects were responsible for it. So even to this day, Disney requires that their projects be managed by an architect first. Uh-huh. So when they outsource projects, they go architect first, everybody else comes in below them. And so they still have that kind of rooted experience. So the fact that we get a bonus in having project managers take some of the heat away from architects, and we get to play in design world more, is great for me. So
what are the of the different disciplines that you've had to play conductor towards, any favorites, least favorites, frustrating, collaborations, or
as a matter of fact, it was just the opposite each time. And still to this day, if I get the opportunity to collaborate with anybody on any form of discipline, whether it's a flume manufacturer or a roller coaster manufacturer or a retailer with a very protected IP or a restaurateur with a 5-star chef, It doesn't matter the discipline. I'm going to learn something, and I'm going to learn it to the best of my ability every single time I go in there. And I'm going to offer some historic knowledge, but I'm definitely there to learn on top of it. So that's probably what makes this so entertaining to me, so to speak, is that technology changes all the time. Rides and attractions and how they're built and how they're delivered changes all the time. The fact that you can be fluid and dynamic and in that is helpful. And being there from some of the pretty rotten stuff that happened in the 80s, and a lot of good happened in Lotte World. They had a very good budget, and we set the bar high. Greg and Rich Battaglia both
the indoor and outdoor sections of that park.
Oh my gosh,
so
the castle I worked very closely with Howard Brummett on, and it was just fantastic to watch that guy. I mean, he could unfold a building with 3 or 4 drawings, and it's like you're taking an X-ray through the thing. It was just amazing, and he really taught me a lot. And I don't know, there's even the techniques back then. We used a lot of plaster, and then polycarbonate started coming on, and then EFIS came into being, and codes changed. When I started, the code book was a single book about this big, and now it's this big. It's just voluminous.
You got to watch out for the architectural acronyms, the exterior insulated finish systems.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Conversation.
As a matter of fact, it was a big deal when we were doing the Warner Brothers project, because as an indoor facility, you were only allowed 10% or so of your facade could be flammable. So with that much theming going on, how do you do that with lightweight material?
Yeah.
They just don't make it. So we had to be very creative, and I got very creative on how we solved that problem. And it was so far as I can tell, it's worked. And nobody knows what I did, but it worked out well.
Well, now the world knows, Jeff. Thanks for
not quite. If I told you, it'd be kind of disgusting, but but yeah, I mean, when you're working in different environments, you're working in Lotte World, for example, it was a cold, very, very cold. So the outdoor park had to be protected for that. It wasn't used in the wintertime, but then when you go to Abu Dhabi and you do a project and it's completely opposite weather, and how do you build for that? I mean, who would have thought that you had to put a trough system underneath all of your mechanical systems and all their lines to collect the condensation to reuse that water for the facility? You don't do that in every building, but that one we were getting gallons and gallons of water just in condensation. So what do you do with it? So we made a pro out of it. We turned it into a functioning system that they use all the time, forever. Yeah. So
you mentioned technology changes, things update. I've seen a lot of your drawings now, and the hand drawn aspect of where you came from. I mean, I'm sure Howard Brummett never used a computer, and there's all of the CAD work that's done in-house now these days. Talk to me a bit about how that sort of evolution comes and goes, and the values that we learn from.
Back when I started, we were still drawing on vellum.
Yeah.
We had moved on to Mylar drawings, which Mel might remember, but we had Rapidograph and Mylar, and we had the first attempt at managing the layers of your documentation by using pin bar Mylar. So you'd have this pin bar at the top of your drawing board, and you'd draw one sheet, had your floor plan on it, you'd put another full sheet of Mylar down, and that would have your lettering on it for your notes. The next one would have, just the piping design. Next one would have just the electrical design, and we would move these around the same base plan to shoot drawings. So, and then we went from that to I was trained on an Eris, which was it was about the same time AutoCAD started, and we were using Eris, and unfortunately everybody went to AutoCAD. So by the time I got to the point where everybody was using AutoCAD, I was still doing hand-drawn design drawings.
Yep.
So they just had me keep doing that because we didn't have photorealism renderings back then. We had to do them ourselves, right? So I just kept drawing, and then gravitated to mostly design, but I had enough construction knowledge that helped our teams through construction. So, it was, it went from CAD to AutoCAD to, of course, Revit, which it is today.
Yeah,
just 3D modeling.
Where you're building the building virtually and building information modeling. And
it's quite different, quite dynamic. A whole new set of experts came into the industry, beyond IT, just
right.
the Revit guys. And now it's almost uncommon if you don't hear about a BIM execution plan prior to starting your documentation. Everybody's got to negotiate it. Everybody's got to agree to it. And then that BIM execution plan is the basis for your building information modeling system. So it's
Jeff,
interesting that
I imagine you've worked with a lot of different creative directors, from guys that really have a solid production, kind of art direction background, a Stuart Craig, right? Coming off of the Harry Potter films and translating that into real world architecture that's not going to fall down after the shooting wraps. But I imagine there's other art directors that are a little more literary or story or narrative focused. Do you have kind of a preference in terms of having more bandwidth leeway on the design side one way or the other? Or
I love working with those guys. I did get a chance to interact a little bit with John Hogg, who had a direct line to Stuart Craig on the Harry Potter projects, which we documented for them in Beijing. And it's I don't know. There's something special about those guys who come out of the movie industry who understand story. Excuse me, who build the story sets the way they used to. For example, not many people notice, but when you're coming into the Harry Potter land, the road to Hogsmeade rises and it narrows just a little bit, just like Main Street a little bit. It rises up and it creates that forced perspective. And Stuart Craig and John Hodgman and their team were elegant and beautiful at remembering how to do that properly. And it's not done all the time anymore because sightlines are certainly studied, very carefully, and building scale is studied very carefully vertically. And but there was something unique about those movie guys who know that forced perspective like the back of their hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, when they just draw their sketches, you can see it, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. Their napkin sketches ought to be works of art in a frame.
I'm
somewhere.
sure in your career, though, Jeff, you've had to take whether it's just interns or young designers straight out of architecture school and kind of, almost de-architect them, from the real world rules of especially minimalist contemporary modern architecture into that realm of spatial storytelling and kind of filmic production. That's got to be that's got to have been a repeated and continuing challenge over the course of your career.
It's funny you say that, Mel. I used to give senior crits at San Luis Obispo, which is an architectural school on the West Coast, which is pretty renowned architectural school. And one year we went up there, and the students had worked a year on their projects, and this time everything was in AutoCAD. And we graded them, but then as a critique to the staff before we left, because we met with the staff after the students, and we said, look, we need you to teach your students how to draw. Put the computer down and start drawing again, because until they can get their hand, eye, mind working together, going straight into CAD is going to limit them. It's going to limit them on how they build things. Now, certainly there's parametric architecture now that is endless in terms of forms and organic shapes that you see throughout the world now. But 20 years ago, it wasn't that way. And you still needed to have that hand to mind. And I still feel like it's an important quality for architects or anybody in design to have an ability to, at least, you don't have to be the greatest artist, but you should at least have an idea. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of Calatrava's sketches, they're terrible. They're terrible, but he started a napkin sketch and he did it by hand. He does it by hand. And boy, does he execute, right? I mean, his buildings are amazing. So there's still a lot of guys like that. And I still think that that's an important thing. So when you talk about bringing students, not so much today, but certainly in the late 2000s, early teens, we were still, bringing interns in and sitting them down and teaching them how to draw and encouraging them to draw more. It's funny. I gave just this year, I gave a master planning student a crit on her final portfolio. And the one thing I told her to do is list all of the computer programs she knows how to work on. And she knew like 15, but she hadn't listed them. So here we've come full circle, right? And now the important things coming out of school are InDesign and, AutoCAD or Revit and, Inkscape and all the Lumion, all the graphic file so that you can build a complete portfolio. Because there are good tools. Dinosaurs like me still work by hand, but it's a helpful tool also. So
it's just good we have some dinosaurs around. We want to still smell the ink on the finger or know what it's like.
Still have a callus on your hand from drawing.
Well, Jeff, it's been great to have you on. Really, really appreciate you telling and sharing the stories. I'd like to leave you with one more question. Is there a project where you got to be involved at the architect level, maybe even a little distant from it, but where you walked into the experience sometime later at opening day or something like that, that just made you say, wow?
Yeah, quite a few actually. Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi certainly was one. Just, everything I did for Disney, I got a backdoor entrance before soft opening.
Yeah.
We recently, I was the architect for, I was the architect in charge of Nintendo World for AECOM, who documented the project for Universal. And that project was, when we started it, we didn't have the technology for the visors.
Right.
Okay. And they were years behind schedule. They were supposed to have this early so we could plan accordingly. But if you look at that world has a facade and a roof that has multiple kinetic things popping up and on. And how do you build that? We didn't know how to build that when we got the design directive. Sorry, I'm going long, but I'll tell you, I got to work a lot on the detailing to figure that out, to figure out how to hold those structures, how to dynamically hold those, how to do it in an earthquake environment, how to do it in a hurricane environment.
Yeah.
So lots of dynamic things happening on top of that. How do you waterproof a building that has all these things that move around on it?
Well, I love that example because it really blurs the line between show set design, animatronics, landscape architecture, architects, architecture, set design. I mean, it's
when I did all that, and then I got to walk into the opening day. It was like, wow, this is quite rich. It was a pretty good experience. So
very, very cool. Well, Jeff Damron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys, Mel, Freddy.
We can't thank you enough. Look forward to many more awesome projects together. Well, Mel, at the end of the interview there, Jeff mentioned walking around Nintendo World just before it opened to the public. And what a exciting moment that must be for any master planner, architect to see how this project that starts as some pretty simple sketches and moves into those worlds. And I know you and the team have visited Nintendo World and kind of made that a little bit of a place of benchmark. What does that mean to you, especially with regard to connecting your teams and clients with real world expansion upon a master plan idea?
Well, like a lot of things that we actually had a hand in building that as well, as you know, and I think for us, the ability to step into spaces that previously only existed, whether it was in a digital world, like a video game or a Pixar movie like Cars Land, or something that only existed in 2 dimensions on screen, it really is powerful. And obviously to be able to take your family, your friends through that, it was definitely special, not only taking our creative team through that, but also last week, actually, we were able to take a number of clients through and to really kind of think about how this gives you a taste, with being the first, for example, augmented reality dark ride with Mario Kart. As we're looking to the future, really kind of being a little bit more of a tangible, visceral taste of what that true interactive future looks like, where you're really talking about extended reality and stepping into the story and interacting with characters seemingly in 3D that are in fact digital characters. We're excited to roll out some of our proprietary software, like our Ozone tech, real-time rendering and what that means with AI and AR. And so, it's just a wonderland of fun if you can get past the crowd. So that's my only warning is you got to time it right, because you still have those boring disciplines of industrial engineering and revenue management and all those kind of things that you can dream and create and do the best stuff in the world. But not only does it just take people to create that reality, but it also needs the ability to sometimes to just say no to incremental crowds and revenue. And that's some of the challenges I think Universal is bouncing right now with cost and revenue. And obviously it's a hit. But that's how do you turn away hordes of people with sacks of cash wanting to drop it on your front yard, So.
Well, I think it's just a fascinating concept, right? The person who came up with Mario, and starting out in that little digital world, 8-bit world, and now it's such a wonderful experience to walk through and touch, and each new generation, as we continue to move forward, we're going to see more and more amazing developments far beyond what that original idea was. Well, Mel, it's time for us to get off the water before the mosquito hordes come gathering around. I think I just saw one. What do you say we turn this boat around?
I'm with you, Skipper.
All right. Until next time. Thanks, Mel. The Themed Attraction Podcast is hosted by Freddy Martin and Mel McGowan. We want you to know that we do not take your listening for granted. We love that you listen to the show, and we love that you share it with your friends. We really also like meeting you out in the real world, so if you ever see us, please do give us a high five or something. Would you mind helping us out, too, by leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts? That really helps others find the show, and we appreciate the good feelings. Well, we want to thank our special guest, Jeff Damron. Connect with Jeff through Mel and the team at Storyland Studios, or shake hands with him on LinkedIn. Get access to new shows, stories, and interviews at themedattraction.com. Start your own profile, discuss the latest advancements, and interact with your fellow theme park designers around the world. Follow the action on Instagram and Twitter at Themed Attraction, and join our active discussion group on LinkedIn. Connect with Mel by email via mel@storylandstudios.com, or follow him on Twitter at Mel McGowan and Instagram at Visioneer. You can find me at freddymartin.net and follow my adventures at SkipperFreddy on Instagram and Twitter. Our theme music was composed by Rob Watson, other music provided by The Lost Dogs. This episode was designed and produced by the one and only Dr. Barry Hill. Barry is the owner and publisher of Rivershore Press, maker of fine, absolutely beautiful books on theme parks and design. He's also the host of America's Disneylands, a podcast on the history of regional theme parks. Check out all the fun stories and history at americasdisneylands.com and find great books to read at rivershorepress.com. You know, Mel, Barry told me the other day that some animals in the jungle are happy, like the laughing hyena, and some animals in the jungle are sad, like the duck-eating crocodile. They have down in the mouth. But Barry told me there's one animal in the jungle that is as confused as it can be. The polar bear. Thanks for listening, folks.